This happened about 4 months ago. I am a freshman in university, and at the time I was only 17 years old. To give a little perspective, I am 4'11" and about 110 pounds, very petite and not menacing in any sense of the word. I was home alone, and it was approximately 9 p.m. It was dark like nighttime because it was winter. It is critical to note that I was a very foolish girl. I didn't lock the doors because I was home, and I was inclined to believe that I lived in a very safe neighborhood, which never had any criminal activity as long as I had resided there. I was alone for the later part of the day, and my mother had asked me to mop the tiles earlier that day. Being the procrastinator I notoriously was, I left it until about an hour before I expected her to come home. The tiles are parallel to the front door, and the door is metal with 2 locks, both undone, and a glass cut out in the door, like a 2-way window. So I was cleaning the tiles when the doorbell rings. To be fair, I never answer the door when I'm alone, but the person outside had seen me through the window in the door, and it felt rude to just ignore him. As I step closer, I see a man with blonde hair in his early 30s watching me approach the door. He looked normal enough, so without much hesitation or thought, I pulled the door open. The man first pauses and looks at the knob, and in that moment I realized that he was puzzled as to why I didn't have to unlock the door prior to opening it. The convo was, "Hi, can I help you?" "Hello, I am with blank phone company. Are your parents home?" We are not with that company, and my dad is taking a shower right now, so he can't speak to you." I don't hear any water running. Are you sure he can't come out to speak to me? My company is offering a promotional offer that only lasts till the end of this month." "No thanks, maybe you can come back tomorrow." "Well, maybe I can talk to you. How old are you?" At this point, I'm getting slightly creeped out. Who would be doing promotions so late at night? "I'm 17. I don't think I can help you. The bill is not in my name or anything." "Can I come in? I can show you the details of our offer, and maybe you can convince your dad to switch to our network." I'm super freaked out now. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't let you in. Please come back tomorrow." At this point, I nearly slammed the door shut. The man doesn't say anything, but he doesn't exactly abruptly leave either. I lock the chain slowly so he doesn't hear it, but he's still looking at me with a creepy look through the window. He then waved and walked off the porch. I notice he doesn't have a company car with him. Feeling paranoid, I fully lock up, and shortly after my mom arrived home. I did not convey her anything about what happened, for I was worried I would be scolded. The next day, there was a knock on the door, but this time, it was the police. The house adjacent to us was broken into last night, ransacked, and the owner was beaten badly. They wanted to know if we had seen anything, and reluctantly, I explained the previous incident to them. Unfortunately, they never caught the individuals responsible, and the owner of the house soon moved out after. The house is still vacant, and sometimes I wonder what would have happened to me if I had let the man inside. I will never open the door again.
This encounter happened right after New Year's Eve of 2011 when I was 17 and a senior in high school. My parents had gone out of state to visit my grandparents, but I was taking a pretty rigorous course load of exams and papers coming up, so I couldn't afford to miss the classes to go with them. I had never been allowed to stay home alone with both parents being gone for so long, never more than a couple of days, and my siblings were usually there. My parents were gone for 9 days, and the night before they returned, shit got real. Having always been a night owl, It was perfectly normal for me to be awake at odd hours just as I was on the night in question. I was sitting in my bed, texting a good friend of mine and browsing the internet when our 3 Labradors started barking like crazy. My family lived on 10 acres in the middle of nowhere in Tennessee, in a pretty wooded area, so I assumed they had just seen a deer or raccoon or something. The dogs quieted down, so I didn't think anything of it for about 5 minutes. Then I hear what sounds like the window in the bedroom below me opening. I think to myself, silly, you're just tired and psyching yourself out. That lasted for just a moment because I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The stairs were directly next to my room, with the stairwell opening up right next to the door of my bedroom. I reached over to my door, not making a sound, and locked it. Afraid to make a sound, I asked the friend I had been texting to call 911 because there was someone in my house. My bedroom was near the living room and kitchen, so I could hear this intruder trashing the kitchen, opening drawers, cabinets, tearing open a trash bag and emptying it onto the floor. The 911 operators called my cell phone, but I was too afraid to answer. Thankfully, my friend stayed on the line with them and I answered all of their questions through him. I could hear the rustling slow down as the creeper moved a bit further from me into the living room. I hear footsteps retreat down the stairs again, and then silence. No dogs barking, no window opening. About 40 minutes of sitting there, not alone, scared, crying. After the initial 911 call, the police finally arrived. They tapped on my bedroom window, which scared the daylights out of me. I walked to the front door to let them in. A detail that concerned me most about letting the police in, when I did, the security alarm started blaring. It had been armed the entire time. Another odd detail, the window that I heard open was the only entrance to the house that didn't have an alarm sensor. Nothing was taken, just sorted through, and a few days later, one of the neighbors called the police out for a similar incident. Truthfully, I don't know why my parents left me home alone because there had been a string of break-ins in the relative area in the weeks before. To my knowledge, there was never an arrest made in any of the cases.
So I grew up in Las Vegas. I moved there when I was in the 2nd grade. I was around 7 or so. My mother was working at some sort of motorcycle repair shop in Arizona that wasn't paying the bills all too well. She jumped at the offer of a new job, of course. Fast forward about 5 years, I'm in middle school now. My brother and I were almost exactly 2 years apart. I was about to turn 12, so he was 10 at the time. My mother, being quite low on the seniority list, was forced to work late nights. That left me and my brother home alone after school more often than not. Our nights were usually pretty uneventful. Usually consisted of us avoiding whatever homework was assigned, warming up leftovers in the microwave, and watching whatever sparked our interest on the TV, which was usually either WWE wrestling or some kind of cartoon. We usually ended up in bed before our mom got home, but occasionally we'd wait up for her. One night, or I suppose one afternoon, considering it was still broad daylight, everything was pretty normal. My brother sat on the living room floor, engulfed in whatever was on the TV, and I was using my mom's desktop computer, feeding my virtual pets. Then there was a rather aggressive knock at the door, which was very odd. I was sort of an outcast child. I didn't really have too many friends, nor did my brother. Even then, we lived in what you would consider a senior living community. My mother was the youngest adult there and was around her mid-30s. My brother, being too short to reach the peephole, doesn't move, only slightly reacts and looks at me. I get up from the computer chair and make my way to the front door to glance out the peephole. I see a man in a black ski mask staring back at me through the peephole. It definitely didn't seem real. It sort of seemed like something from a cliché movie, as if he were dressed to rob a bank. I was immediately scared shitless, and I obviously didn't bother asking who he was. I silently stepped away, shut the TV off, grabbed my brother and our small black Pomeranian, and ran towards my bedroom. Once we were safely hidden in my closet, I informed him of what I saw outside. He didn't say much, but was visibly shook, just quietly stood there holding our dog. I slid the tiny flip phone our mom left us for emergencies from my pocket and dialed 911. I whispered to the operator the entirety of the call, as I didn't think the man had left considering the knocks persisted after we left the living room. Yet somehow she understood me and sent an officer over. Immediately after the call ended with the operator, I dialed for our mother. I explained everything to her. She ended up leaving work early and ended up coming home around the same time the police had arrived. I'm not quite sure what deterred him of pursuing further, but of course the man was gone by the time they both arrived. The officer was very clearly not taking any of it seriously, most likely thinking these two young boys were just paranoid from staying home alone. It was probably some young man playing a joke on a friend of his explanation. However, like I stated previously, we lived in a senior living community. Who could possibly be playing a joke? His dear grandmother? He then gave my brother and I stickers, as if this would console our nerves after seeing some masked madman pounding on our door. Fortunately, I never saw the stranger after that. After that experience, my house, however, had been broken into, as well as my car 3 times. Thankfully, none of us were present when any of this took place, since my family and I have moved out of the state and installed a security camera. Nevertheless, creepy ski mask man, let's not meet.
It was the middle of summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in the Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone scrolling through Reddit and Twitter when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the door is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained in trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early. So I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So the stairs are pretty tight and walled in, so it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this but replacing the rail with a wall. So I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old as shit and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of those steps, so when I get to the second to last step, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid and just normally walked the last 2 steps and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They weren't just at his sides. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had them rotated to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back on it now, I realized how fucking creepy this situation was. But in that moment, I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping, pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined it up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I fucking sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob like you see on TV. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and nearly, in tears, told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. The fucker was standing outside my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello? Sir? Sir, are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually the light returned to the gap and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't even leave me home alone anymore. Thank God. And I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still. But I'm doing all right. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever the fuck was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet ever again.
It all started when I stayed home from school because I didn't feel good. My parents both worked, so I was alone from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I'd been home alone a lot before, so I was comfortable, and I knew how to handle myself. Around 1 p.m., I heard a knock at the door. I was sick and lazy, so I ignored it. I also knew it wasn't wise for a young girl that's home alone to answer to a stranger. It knocked again, so I look out my bedroom window on the 2nd floor, and it's a man standing there peering into the small window next to the door. His truck was parked in our driveway, and I recognized it as the exterminator. I didn't recall my mom saying he was coming, so I just decided to wait until he left. I go downstairs to get water when I see him roaming around my deck, looking into all of my windows. I knew he was just checking if people were home, but it freaked me out. I, trying not to be seen, slithered into the next room, hoping he never saw. After about 5 minutes, I sneak into the living room and see if the truck is still there. Yup, Our living room had a glass door that leads into the sunroom that's connected to the deck. I turned around, still kind of paranoid. He was going to see me, and he's in the sunroom. He was an older man, and God, he had some bad eyesight. I was crouched behind a coffee table, and he caught sight of my cat Scooter. He made a face at her, and she hissed and growled. That's when I hopped up to tell him he couldn't be there. I made my way to the door and opened it. He said, hi, you're Emma, right? My face went white, and how on earth did he know my name? I said, yeah, how do you know me? And he said, I know your parents. Can I come in and inspect? I stupidly said they were at work. I still was incredibly weirded out that a stranger, who I've never seen, comes to my house and knows my name. He looked me up and down and said, I'll come back another time. After I said my parents weren't around. All I wanted was for the creep to leave. I shut and locked the door and make my way to my room. He goes back to his truck and gets in. He sits there for a good 2 minutes as I watched from the window trying not to be seen. He finally leaves. I called my mom and asked if she was expecting the exterminator, and she said no. I hung up really confused, but I calmed myself down and didn't want to scare myself. When my mom comes home, I'll tell her everything. The fact he knew my name and was looking through the windows. She looked concerned and said she had never called him to our house or anything. When I explained his appearance, she said she vaguely remembered him inspecting her house prior, but not at all did he know my parents lived alone by name. Luckily, he never came, and I never saw him again. So, creepy exterminator, let's not meet.
This experience happened this summer of July of 2015. To give some background to the story, I live in a small town in California, just 20 miles from the coast, and it is considered one of the safest and friendliest towns in the state. Crime is usually rare, besides the usual teens caught smoking weed or drinking alcohol. But what I experienced that night was an experience that I will never forget. I am a 17-year-old male, recently graduated from high school, and soon going into college. Because it is summer, I finally have the rare chance and freedom to do whatever I want all day without worrying about schoolwork. And I also have the freedom to stay up all night if I want to. Anyways, one day, my parents told me that they were going to leave the house in the morning and not come back until the next day, meaning that I had the house to myself all day and night. My mom was getting surgery and was staying overnight, and my dad decided to stay with her in the hospital. I was pretty excited that I would have the house to myself for 24 hours, because I never did before. But what happened made me wish my parents were there. As usual, all I did was watch TV, play video games, and be unproductive all day. Basically my summer experience. When night rolled around, I was still playing Xbox until around 11 p.m. when things got weird. Now, to give you a few more backgrounds. My family has 2 indoor cats. Both are extremely friendly Maine Coon cats, until something happens outside. Whenever there is a bird, raccoon, or a person, they get excited and their feline instincts kick in, and they immediately rush to the window and start meowing and growling. They growl especially if someone is at the door. All of this information will be relevant for later. So, back to the story. It was close to 11 at night when I was still on my ass playing Call of Duty. The noise volume was fairly low. So suddenly, I heard a few taps coming from the general front door area, like light footsteps and small scrapes. My cat suddenly bolted from another room in the house. I paused the game and looked over, and saw my cats were walking around excitedly, with their tails pointed up and their ears perked. Although my hair stood up as well, I simply dismissed the noise as a rat or a raccoon, either on the front yard or on the roof, because we have so many that I hear them all the time, especially at night. Also, I was too engaged in my game to know where the specific noise was coming from, so I just assumed the roof. A few seconds later, I returned to my game, although my cats were still clearly nervous and excited. I almost forgot about the sounds a few minutes later, when I heard it again. This time, louder, now sounding more like something hard shuffling across our stone-paved front yard from the front door area. My cats quickly sprinted to the window that overlooked the yard and started to meow excitedly and occasionally hiss. This time, I knew something was definitely there. I paused my game again and went over to the window where my cats were to see what was out there. I expected a deer or coyote, since rats cannot make that type of sound, and the noise only came from outside the door, not the roof. I peered out but saw nothing, since it was very dark. Coming back to the television, I was a bit more creeped out. I've decided I didn't want to play any more Xbox, since my hairs were standing up and shivers were spreading through my body. Besides, I've already played enough for today. Being 6'4" and weighing 200 pounds, I felt like a dumbass and a pussy for being afraid of a deer. I decided I would brush my teeth and go to bed. Before that, I went into the bathroom, and when I was just standing there thinking all of this, crazy shit happened. My cats heard it before me. Both of them ran to the front door, one of them growling like I've never heard before. A split second later, I heard it. Heavy shuffling footsteps right outside the door. And then another split second, the automatic lighting for the front porch turned on. Now this time, I knew it was a person for sure. Only a human can make obvious footsteps like that, and automatic lighting only turns on for big objects like people. There was no knock or doorbell ring, but the front door is loose on its hinges, and if you slightly push or nudge it, the door rattles. This is exactly what happened, and that rattle terrified me to the bone. Just knowing that I was home alone, in the dark except my TV screen, with footsteps and the automatic light turning on outside, gives me a feeling of terror that I will never forget. My cats were absolutely going crazy at this point, meowing, hissing, and growling. Although every single muscle in my body told me to get away, curiosity that people get to look at terror got the better of me, and I quietly snuck to the door. If you enter my house, you would enter the mudroom, which is just a closet and a place to put shoes. And then you would have to turn right to a former doorway without a door to enter the living room where I was. Also, my door is not a fully wooden door like most people have, but instead it has decorative glass in the place where the panel should be. Anyway, I snuck up to the mudroom and peered around the empty doorway to see through the glass. A figure of a person was standing there. I cleared my throat and mustered up the courage to ask, "Who's this?" No answer. Now I asked, "Who are you?" The figure bent down and cupped his hands to his face and peered through the glass. The terror swept me again, with my throat tightening and shivers spreading across my body. Because I was in such shock, I hardly remember the facial features of the person, except that it was a thin-faced African-American guy. We stared at each other for a few seconds, and his expression turned into a scowl, like disappointment that I was home. And in a second, this guy was gone. I could hear the fast-paced footsteps of shoes against stone as this guy ran off. About 15 seconds later, I heard a vehicle turn on and a screech of tires as he drove off. My terror turned into warm, sweet relief as I knew this guy was gone. My cats finally stopped acting so crazy, and just like two little cute kittens, forgot about it, walked to whatever corner of the house, lied down, and started snoozing like nothing ever happened. I called my dad immediately, and when it was ringing, I thought of what I should tell him. When he picked up, I hesitated on telling him of what just happened. I don't know why. Maybe it was because I didn't want him to deal with the house burglar and police while still having to deal with my mom just waking up from surgery and in pain. So I didn't tell him, and never told him, or my mom, what I experienced that night. I didn't want my parents to worry, especially because they were more on the overprotective side. My theory of the guy who did this was that he was scouting the neighborhood and looking for empty driveways so that he can somehow break into a house and steal whatever he can find. Since our car was gone and I was home alone, he probably thought there was nobody home. I'm guessing the shuffling and light footsteps the first 2 times when I thought it was a rat or a deer was him hesitating or something. And on the 3rd time, he found the courage to look through our glass panel. Finally, when he heard me, he became curious and looked through the glass. However, when he saw me, he figured he couldn't rob the place because I was there, so he bolted up and drove away. Again, this is just my theory. I really have no idea what this guy was up to. The important thing is, I have never seen or heard of this guy again, and I am relieved that he hopefully will never visit our house again. Actually, now that I think about it, I wish he could come back so I'd be waiting with a baseball bat to show him who the fuck he's messing with. I'm still angry at myself that I reacted in fear and terror, and promise I would react differently if that would ever happen again. In conclusion, let's not meet. Or maybe we could meet again.
Hey guys, this is a Sinful Savant. I want to make sure that a big shout out goes to Joey's Nightmares for putting this collaboration together, and really appreciate all of his help that he's given me to help get my channel and my name out there. And make sure to check out Joey's channel, guys, Joey's Nightmares. And then make sure to check out Dark Stories. She's super talented, great voice, great channel too. So make sure you guys check out both their channels and support them equally. So until next time, guys, stay sinful. Hey guys, this